So, moving on with the next guest, we will have ecoLogicStudio. From London, UK, Claudia, Pasquero, and Marco Poletto founded in 2005 ecoLogicStudio. ecoLogicStudio is an architecture and design innovation firm specialized in biotechnology for the built environment. In 2018, it has joined the Synthetic Landscape Lab and the Urban Morphogenesis Lab to create photosynthetic venture. Together, they are developing scalable nature-based design solutions to the imminent impact of climate change and to our contemporary quest for carbon neutrality. With works all over the world, including Lisbon, Portugal, COP26, and the Venice Biennale, welcome from London, ecoLogicStudio. Hi, Claudia.
Hey, hello.
And
can you
Marco,
hear us?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be part of this event.
Thank you. It's great to have you here. Unfortunately, not here in Porto, but I'm sure in the future we will manage to have the opportunity. So now we'll give the stage to you and, make your magic.
Thank you. So we will share the screen and also the sound, because we have a couple of videos. Can you see our presentation now?
Yes, we are seeing the presentation perfectly, yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for having us again, and then thank you for the introduction. You already mentioned that ecoLogicStudio is a design innovation firm. We specialized on the advanced integration of nature and biotechnology, the built environment. And we have created a venture with the two academic lab that Claudia is leading. Maybe you want to introduce yourself as well.
Nice to see you all. I'm Professor Claudia Pasquero. I head of urban design and chair for landscape architecture at Innsbruck University, as well as associate professor at the Bartlett UCL. I lead the synthetic landscape lab at Innsbruck University, and I founded the urban morphogenesis lab at the Bartlett, which together with ecoLogicStudio bring forward this project across research and practice.
So we collaborate, of course, with many different organizations that go from cultural institutions all the way to the industry. And today we will illustrate a little bit the ranges of projects and innovation we have focused in the last 3-4 years. So this will be a kind of a highlight of the latest work. But obviously you are more than welcome to check our new website, ecoLogicStudio.com, that shows you wider range of projects, and also very much our paper and text for the one of you that are interested to go a little bit more in depth. So we engaged, as I said, with different kind of innovation. 3D printing, biodigital design is one of the core area of research, especially in connection with the Synthetic Landscape Lab. Urban well-being, it's another area where we have created an interesting segments of our work, our research. This is the example of Astana. We will look at it more in detail later. Future food, as well as carbon neutrality, are other two topics that we will be discussing today. So, I mean, for many people, these kind of issues are perhaps marginal to architecture as a discourse, and I think this is something that for us was always, let's say, peculiar, because we never really looked at the city or architecture as a kind of a static morphological system, but we always understood it as a morphogenetic process. So the city as a kind of living artificial system that evolves or co-evolves with the biosphere. And this co-evolution is often problematic, and I think it becomes quite obvious if we look at the flows that sustain our increasingly demanding metabolism or the increasingly demanding metabolism of our urban sphere or our built environment, we realize that the extraction of resources on one hand and the production of waste and pollution on the other hand, which is inherent in the metabolism of our cities, it's become unsustainable, and therefore it becomes critical, but also I think a very interesting challenge for any designer or architect or planner today to imagine how the future of our cities could operate in a circular manner, where essentially the waste becomes raw material for new processes, and also how this circular metabolism may look like and may feel like. And this is, of course, numerically now quite obvious why the challenge is pressing. The world population, the global population is not growing as fast as it used to, but the urban population is increasing. And by urban population, I don't mean only people who live in big city centers or global city centers, but I mean all the social groups and community groups that, despite living in the countryside or in suburbia, are now dependent on the provisions of the urban sphere. They now are part of this great global metabolism of the urban sphere, and therefore are in a way or another involved into this metabolic process. As I was mentioning, of course, this metabolic process has emissions which are significant also in modern cities like London, for example. And these emissions, as we know, are toxic for humans as well as for other animals and living systems, but not for all. The interesting shift that we have discovered in our collaboration with microbiologists and with biotechnologists is that there is a significant part of the biosphere, especially in the microscopic world of bacteria and fungi and slime molds and other organisms of that kind, that feeds on the emissions of the city and that actually proliferates successfully in the urban realm, for example, in its water bodies and canals and rivers, etc. Not only despite the pollution, but even because of the emission. So essentially, they have adapted very well to this kind of artificial habitat that we have created. And so, at this point, one of the questions that we have formulated and that has become the basis for the Photosynthetica project is, can we in fact design this artificial biodigital habitat in such a way that we can effectively transform or remetabolize emissions to create new processes, to create new products, new material systems, new architectural organisms, and therefore to slowly remetabolize the contemporary urban sphere into the biocity of the future. So, as I said, this is very much the remit of the Photosynthetica project. And Photosynthetica, in that sense, has become for us really a line of inquiry of its own, I would say, and very much focused on the intelligence of one organism, or I should say one category of organisms, because microalgae are not really one, but there are hundreds of different strands, and they are also very different from each other when you look at them in the microscope or when you actually look at the properties. So essentially, it's a whole layer of the biosphere, which happens to be one of the oldest layers of the biosphere, but also one of the layers that most than other has adapted to the kind of Anthropocene world that we have created, and it's proliferating naturally, but that we have not yet really learned how to engage with or how to design with to the advantage of remetabolizing our city. So that's the core task of Photosynthetica.
Microalgae are in itself a consequence of climate change and bloom on many of the water bodies across the planet. You can see here a satellite view of the Baltic Sea, and this is a boat in the middle. And one of the cultural aim also of Photosynthetica is to somehow create an alliances with these microorganisms, so to that are able to feed on elements that are dangerous for human life. So to transform the city where the polis from a center from human to a center for human and non-human, where habitat for multiple form of life can be designed and created. And thanks to this collaboration, we can create more complex ecologies in the city, able to define what Marco before mentioned is a circular form of ecology.
We are now part of an exhibition that will open in March in Karlsruhe at the Center for Art and Media, ZKM, and it's interesting because it's an exhibition that is in collaboration with the Natural History Museum of Karlsruhe, and it actually looks at this the history of life and how it has transitioned into this new Anthropocene age. And for us, it was very interesting to realize how microalgae, in fact, belong to one of the continuous strands of life that has basically crossed every era of our planet, even are responsible for creating the atmosphere that we breathe. And for us, curiously enough, are now already evolving and adapting to the so-called contaminated habitats and atmospheres that we or our cities are producing. And so in that sense, they are, from our point of view, the archetype of the urban spheric organism, the organism that is by definition adapted already to this kind of anthropocenic world. Of course, in the microscope, they appear in different forms. This is the cell of spirulina, for example, which is called like this precisely for its form, is one of the biggest cells. But microalgae come in a variety of shapes and forms, which means that they are already, in a sense, part of several industries, which are using and looking at them to create new generation of biomaterials or a new generation of pharmaceutical products and new generations of energy sources. So they already entered the industry at many levels, but they have not entered the urban rail in a way that can truly have a transformative action towards its shape and form and way of life of who inhabits the city. So the challenge of Photosynthetica is really to combine design, innovation, and science to create artificial habitat to grow algae collectively within the city itself, so that we break out of the industry understood as a kind of world of its own. We break the boundary between landscape, architecture, and the boundaries between city centers, industrial compounds, and we begin to create a kind of new layer, new active photosynthetic layer that is embedded into the fabric of architecture, in the fabric of our cities. These, we believe, will have a transformative action, not just in the industry as such, but really on the daily experience we have of the urban realm and on our ability the collective abilities of urban communities to become active producers of new practices, of new material systems, new products, and new artifacts. And that's really the kind of a philosophical approach we have behind some of the most recent projects, like the playground you just seen before. We will see it more in detail in a second. And also, I think is the main driver for our, I would say, obsession in combining beauty and efficiency. And as designers, we often confronted by this challenge of, and also almost like a cultural prejudice, I would say, where beauty is almost seen as antagonistic to efficiency, to performative behavior. And obviously, if you begin to study the way these organisms and these living systems behave and operate, you will often find that in nature, beauty really is a measure of ecological intelligence. It's a measure of the ability of healthy systems to regenerate, grow, respond to the changes in the environment effectively and efficiently. So what we try to bring in our projects is this kind of direct connection between beauty, the role of beauty as a manifestation of an efficient design, and especially as a way of connecting more directly to the pattern of life that are embedded in our urban realm. And so in that sense, we are really beginning to see architectures as living systems, as living machines, which are no longer, let's say, the product of industrialization, but that are really the expression of a new philosophy of nature, technology of nature.
In that sense, our project tends to discuss how architecture, its interaction with the end user and its interaction with non-human inhabitant can transform the ecology of the city. It's rather different from an architecture with integrated biotechnology. Is an architecture that in itself is transformative of the environment. This is part of many of our projects. This is the Photosynthetica facade in Dublin that integrate multiple species of microalgae from the local water body that range from color of red, brown, and green.
One of the aspects of that immediately captured our attention when we started to work with microorganisms is the fact that working with smaller scale systems, microscopic scale systems, was definitely a challenge for an architect, because it means having to design and bridge the gap in scale, in size, from the micro to the macro. But on the other hand, it was also a big advantage, because it allowed us to develop material solution and architectural solutions with exceptional properties. If we compare, for example, microalgae with trees, with large plants, what is immediately obvious is that these organisms, because they are monocellular, they're single cell organism, their entire body and their entire metabolism is devoted to photosynthesis, is devoted to this process of conversion and fixation of carbon dioxide into biomass and production of oxygen. And this is something that trees and plants do, but they require a big apparatus of branches and trunks and roots to be able to perform this task, because they are complex organisms like us. They have a very complex and demanding metabolism. And this means that their effective and efficient integration of the urban realm is often very problematic. And even when we do achieve this integration, that often limits the performative elements of the tree greatly, because essentially trees work well when they are embedded into large forests, when their roots are connected by mycelium network, where their leaves are part of multiple layers of soil, and so on and so forth. For the microalgae, there is not such a thing, because they are microscopic organisms. As long as they are embedded into a medium, a watery medium, which has enough nutrients, and for them, even the so-called pollutants like NOx's, SOS's, they are nutrients. They will grow. They will grow. They're photosynthesized. And so, if we compare that, for example, as part of a facade or a cladding system, you can see that we can achieve similar carbon absorption performance at a fraction of the weight. Only about 50 liters of algae cultures absorb the equivalent of a large tree. So this opens up the possibility for not only for integrating biotechnologies into new building, but also for, like in this case, retrofit, transform, remetabolize existing building, existing systems. And I think that's very important when we look at the possibility to transform our cities in a short time frame. We obviously have to deal not only with the new built, but also with the transformation, with the remetabolization of the existing. And these are the kind of key properties of combining these systems on the built environment. Because at the same time, we are actively capturing carbon, but we're also reducing energy consumption and improving urban air quality and producing biomass for new products. So there is really a kind of when you close the loop, there is multiple benefits involved, which means obviously also value in itself. And this is just a diagram to describe the kind of basic functioning of one of these reactors. Again, obviously the sun is the powering mechanism activating the photosynthetic process, and CO2 as well as NOx's and other polluting particles in the air are introduced from the bottom and naturally raised through the watery medium, and that's where they come into contact with the living cells of the algae, and they are literally eaten up, captured by the algae, and oxygen is produced and released back into the atmosphere. The really crucial difference between let's say a mechanical filter and this process is that the particles of pollution and carbon dioxide are not just captured in a filter, but they are really transformed, remetabolized by the algae to produce new cells. So they effectively become new biomass, new organisms, and they are therefore trapped into this biomass, which can be used for other products. And so eventually offsetting the need for carbon emissions to fabricate this product in the first place. So again, we have a double advantage. I think you're seeing in the background the video from one of our first larger scale installation. This was in 2015 in Milano for the Expo. We built the world first canopy integrating 2,000 liters of living cultures of spirulina. And again, here was really a first attempt to demonstrate that you could create a new kind of relationship between these organisms and the public realm, essentially using them as a kind of a microclimatic moderator, as a screen, as a sheltering device for people to gather, but at the same time also as a efficient and productive farming system. So this is what we were just mentioning before, and the really important element of storing. It's not just about filtering material or carbon from the atmosphere. It's where do you put this material? And we believe that with nature-based solution, we have the capacity to store and transform carbon into useful raw material, and therefore create a double advantage and a true new circular economy, which is kind of represented by this diagram.
Some of the aspects of the photosynthetic project that we are exploring in a couple of projects we are starting now is also how do we close the cycle? So what happened to the biomass or to the byproduct aside from the transformative act that has got the presence of nature-based solution integrated in architecture in the air, in terms of the possibility to produce biomaterial as well as food and energy. We have explored in the last couple of years the food byproduct, and we have a new project now that explores the production of bioplastic through the biomass produced by the building and the architecture itself.
So we're actually reaching the point in which we are able to directly use the algae that we grow in our reactors and on site transform them into biofabric and bioplastics. No, this is I can take it.
And transforming it in a material itself. We are now working on a project Marco went to pick up. This is part of
we are now so many, and our impact on the biosphere is so large, so vast, then the biological systems cannot adapt fast enough.
We have, therefore, designed inhuman gardens as a form of interface between multiple forms of intelligence, human as well as non-human, and between the built environment and the natural one.
So this is a part of our research on material. I have here a sample.
I don't know if they see us. Or
I don't know if they see
only the
us.
screen.
That's true.
Anyway, maybe we can show it also at the end.
Yeah.
So this project,
Marco, we can see you.
Okay, cool.
You can
so
show
yeah,
it and everyone can see it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. No, there was this sample that we just wanted to show you to give an idea of something that we just producing in our studio, and it's 50% is algae harvested directly from our reactor, and then together with agar and a little bit of glycerin, we are able to obtain a fabric that is actually really strong and can be laser cutted and can be used for different kind of products. At the moment, we are also looking very much at the packaging, biodegradable packaging as a crucial application. And there is a lot of demand, a lot of interest of that from the industry, of course. But I think what is interesting and important for us is not just the material science, it's how it is integrated in the urban realm, how it becomes a part of kind of everyday practices and part of a process of absorbing pollutants and particles, which takes place where the emissions are and where people live. So really creating a new connection.
Also, how these processes can have a transformative aspect on the way socially we interact with ecological systems. So by transforming the way we intend ecology from an ecology of consumerism to an ecology of production, and as we call it, cyber gardening. That is the image of you see here that represents cyber gardening. This is Mark and myself. Gardening hortus, originally produced for the Center Pompidou, currently in Madrid, I believe. And here we are giving nutrient as well as inoculating the microalgae in biogel medium.
This project somehow became a little bit of an emblematic of, let's say, this new found relationship between biology and digital technology. So the idea of the biodigital paradigm. And of course, for us, it has been a great experiment in trying to also explore how 3D printing can offer a new degree of control and articulation of the material. So from the technical point of view, really this experiment was about creating a new relationship between morphology and how the living biogel, which is contained in hortus, can act as an active filter, but also how in itself the substratum, the 3D printed bioplastic that supports the gel, can be articulated, can be printed at a scale that is comparable to the scale of the cell size. And you know that is a 20 micron, the layer, which is a order of magnitude of a spirulina cell. So it's very interesting for us to begin to think that we are not only working with microorganisms, but we can also begin to design and fabricate architectural solutions which operate at a scale that is comparable. And this is obviously made possible by digital technologies like 3D printing, for example, but it obviously requires a specific design sensibility and design technique to fuse these two worlds. And that's also one of the aspects of the research that we have been focusing more. Again, from the conceptual architectural point of view, hortus as a project has, I think, inspired a lot of reactions. This was a shot taken during the exhibition in Tokyo, the Mori Art Museum, which is in an incredible location on the top of Mori Tower, overlooking the city center of Tokyo. And at that point, it became apparent how this notion of remetabolization could be explored or projected also at the scale of the city. And so we started to create a series of visualizations and projections of the Photosynthetica tower as an organism that really operates as an urban remetabolization device. So scaled at this level, it becomes possible for it to absorb from the atmosphere of the city enough nutrients and carbon dioxide to effectively create a new microclimate in and around itself, but also create a new ecology within itself, very much feeding and fueling a series of activities that again have longer no longer create a differentiation or a segregation between leisure and daily life work. And of course, as we shall see, especially with the pandemic, etc., we are now realizing more and more that there is a need for spaces and for environments that are not only more healthy and clean, but also that enable our work, life, leisure balance to be reimagined and reinvented. And so the idea is that the Photosynthetica Tower would become a condenser of activities that in and around the transformation and the consumption of algae or microalgae would build a kind of new community. Of course, this has also repercussions which are of economical nature, I think, for developers that are always looking at these aspects and that are also scrambling these days for solutions that enable a carbon neutral paradigm to be proposed. Of course, it's always possible to offset emissions, but we don't believe that is a truly sustainable option. We think that emissions needs to be remetabolized locally. That's how you change paradigm, not by moving things out of the way or out of sight, but by transforming them in front of your eyes and with the daily practice. And so again, here the cumulative effect of this technology embedded in architecture means the possibility to lower installation cost and maintenance cost, and no loss of leasable space and added value for the biomass and for the data. This in comparison to traditional green technology and green solutions. And again, this is the image of the interior of the tower, showing this kind of atrium or lobby, which is again highly transformed and by the presence of this active layer, this active operational layer of algae filtering and production. And also there is a very direct connection between the labs and the units above and the public realm below.
So this methodological, technological, and cultural framework allow us to tackle projects at different scale and in different realm. Regarding the public realm and the retail environment, one of the first projects we developed is the Biotech Act. The Biotech Act is the first permanent photosynthetic architecture, was originally built for Expo Astana and then remained to the city of Astana as a museum of biotechnology. The Biotech Act is composed of three main interwoven areas: the science lab that we saw before, which is the space where people understand about microalgae, the cycle of interaction with microorganisms, absorption and production in a sort of scientific way. So it is around 60 square meter and is able to self-sustain itself both in terms of energy production and in terms of resources. The second area of the Biotech Art that the visitor encounter is art experience area. So how do we interact with ecology through spatial and morphological articulation? By understanding material flow through daily interaction. Here we can see a visitor of the exhibition interacting with this little pump and therefore feeding the microalgae of CO2 and releasing the oxygen. The Biotech Art absorbs 2 kilograms of CO2 per day, which is the equivalent of 32 large trees or a small urban family-run forest. This happened mainly in the third area we encounter in the Biotech Art, which is the garden. The garden, you can see here the tank and the main production system with the glass grade photobioreactor where the microalgae recirculate and are harvested every 2 weeks. Here is another view of the cultivation system. Chlorella contains 60% of vegetable protein and can produce 600 grams of proteins every day, which is the intake of 12 adults, or the equivalent of protein-based meat that will be produced by the breeding of 8 cows. These numbers are not here to somehow justify the presence of the bioreactor, of the biotech act, but rather to discuss a shift from an architecture that is a machine for living to a living machine, where material expression are interwoven with numerical production, where design and science becomes a single organism. It is impossible to depict one from the other. Here you see some of the system drawing that organize this matter and organize habitats for human and microalgae in the context of the biotech art. Another realm that we have been investigated, especially through a collaboration with Dr. GSK in the last 3 years, is the air bubble playground that is now a registered trademark. The playground, we have designed multiple versions of the playground and start from the aim of working on urban spaces that are able, through their architecture, through the interaction with the user and with the microorganism nature-based solution, to transform and remetabolize the air of the city. And again, I use transform and remetabolize rather than clean, because that is what happened. The air is recirculated and comes out a different air from the one it was before. We have here a little video that describes the overall aim of the air bubble.
Yeah, the video is actually from Sachi in London, and it's part of a campaign that was launched together with the project to raise awareness on the impact of air pollution on children and possible solutions to it.
I feel stuck in the middle. Do I send them out to play in pollution or keep them locked up inside?
Is a major problem. Pollution levels are far worse at the child's height. They are more sensitive to the detrimental effects of air pollution.
We all grew up going outside and not having to worry about things.
I never thought I'd have to protect my kids from the one thing that keeps them alive.
As a mom, it breaks my heart.
I just want to play.
Microalgae are incredible organisms. And with our technology, we can use them to clean our city's air. We have gone to one of Europe's most polluted areas and built the world's first air-purifying biotechnological playground.
The uniqueness of this concept relies on the relationship between the architecture and the kids.
Have fun there.
The more children play, the more the algae absorb pollutants and clean oxygen is released.
This algae is what's taking the bad stuff out of the air.
The air feels amazing.
The key aspects of this project is to create awareness that it is indeed possible to clean the air we breathe.
This can't be the only way to help them breathe better. We need to do more.
So this is the air bubble playground. As we said before, there is the architecture in this case that really metabolize the air is composed of a ETFE membrane that rope the playground, 52 biobomb a photobioreactor, and a set of playful device for kids that while the kids play and bounce, interact with the activation mechanism and the oxygenation mechanism of the microalgae in the environment.
Yeah, here the diagram actually describes a little bit more in detail what Claudia was mentioning, and it is how the architecture of the playground itself becomes instrumental in activating and deploying the potential of the microalgae. This is really the kind of approach that we need to jump scale and to give the possibility to a microorganism to have an impact at a scale that is significant for us. So obviously we cannot transform or remetabolize in one go the whole of the urban atmosphere, but what we can do is with architecture create a microclimate where, in this case, children play, where we spend most of our time, and begin to transform that microclimatic bubble in such a way that it brings immediate relief and wellness. But also, as Claudia was mentioning before, in such a way that this process is actually happening in front of our eyes, and it becomes very much part of our daily experience of transformation and remetabolization.
Inner bubble was not only achieving this transformative aspect of the air, we also had a set of sensors that allow us to expand on the awareness of the behavior of the structure itself, its inhabitant, and the environment. We had sensors distributed across Warsaw as well as in the media space of air bubble, and we register the transformation of the air. So each week we had a reduction between 70 and 90% of PM2.5, NOx, and PM10 and CO2, and therefore a reaction, passage from purple, red to orange to yellow to green, from outside to inside the air bubble of the World Health Organization Air Quality Index.
So the target that we set ourselves was to try to achieve in any moment in time a green level or concentration of pollutants within the air bubble, which is basically the recommended limit from the WHO. And we were actually able to do that, and that was a very exciting result for us. Of course, we are now in the process of developing other test cases in other cities, and it is necessary to run the project in different conditions, different climates, to be able to, let's say, validate these results. But obviously, that was a very encouraging start.
We have subsequently worked and designed on a more itinerant and portable version of air bubble that was firstly present in Glasgow in November at COP26. And we are proud of the fact that design managed to have, if not an impact, at least a voice inside of this event discussing climate change. This is Air Bubble Eco Machine. It's made mainly of air, water, and microorganisms, 90% of the material, and a 0.5 millimeter membrane of TPU. As you can see in the image, it also integrates a sensor that monitor as well as enhance the interaction between the user, the environment, and the microalgae. Here you can see a view of the inside with the photobioreactor, in this case containing chlorella, which was more tuned to the Glasgow environment in comparison to spirulina, which prefer warmer environment. And here you see how by, again, bouncing, and in this case, you can bounce over the structure, you contribute to the aeration of the system and therefore to the photosynthesis to happen.
Yeah, this version of Air Bubble, we really tried to question the overall life cycle of a project and also the carbon neutrality as a concept beyond the number. And so the attempt here was to not just introduce or include microalgae into the architecture, but to conceive the whole system as a living organism made essentially and primarily from water, air, and living organisms. And obviously this was made possible by the use of the development of this membrane in TPU, but also especially by, again, connecting this process with the three-dimensional fabrication and digital fabrication of this membrane. Here you can also get a sense of the sound that you hear when you're inside, and there are these 24 reactors bubbling actively. Very relaxing experience, and we feel that this was also important in the context of COP to bring a more kind of visionary approach to this idea of carbon neutrality. We believe that if we are serious about the idea of carbon neutrality, we will essentially need to re-engineer all the infrastructures and systems we inhabit. It's not just a question of tweaking them a little bit. And so this project just shows what happens if you introduce nature-based solutions and digital fabrication processes. You can create an architecture that is essentially made of air and water. And it is, of course, soft, delicate, translucent, ever-changing, evolving. These are all characteristics that we do not normally associate to architecture, but we do associate to living system. And we believe that architecture will have to get much closer to this type of morphology and materiality if we want to achieve carbon neutrality truly, in a true way. And the benefits, of course, are multiple. It's there is an immediate sense of playfulness and interaction and lightness when you are into air bubble. Not only the air feels fresh, but also the dynamics of it, the water that moves, the patterns that creates, the sense of imbalance that you have to kind of negotiate. Just everything is conducted through a more active and dynamic and playful interaction, which again we believe is a fundamental driver in a kind of truly ecological revolution. And this is the effect in the night, with the lighting system also responding to the sensors, which are directly sensing vibration created by the wind and the air movement itself, but of course also by the movement of the visitors that by walking and bouncing inside of the soft floor contribute to this circulation of air, contribute to this feedback loop. So again, everything is a kind of connected. Every system, it's a sort of feeding into each other, and the aim really is to create an idea of a living architecture that combines digital and biotechnologies into a new living organism.
This is really how, for us, pleasure and aesthetic, visual and interactive pleasure becomes a measure of ecological intelligence. As I said, the air bubble is an iterative system, and we have recently made a few modifications to the type of microalgae we use and to its structure, and we had brought it to Riyadh as part of the Riyadh Biennale and Saudi Design Festival. This allows us to discuss also a transition. Another space we often work with is how do we contribute in terms of public realm to museum space, and this is discussed by the Bit by Bot project that was part of the last Venice Biennale, curated by Asim Sarkis. Invited us to present the project in the Cordelia of the Arsenale at the entrance of the Biennale. The topic was of this year Biennale was how we will live together. And of course, that was our take was, how do we cohabit planet Earth with human and non-human organism? Here we see one of the three elements that compose our sets, which is the convivium, the area of pleasure, where we sort of harvest these microorganisms and interact with them by feeding ourselves. Other elements that compose the space or articulate the space of the bit biobot are the biocortec, the real inhabitation, the filter between the outside and inside, where the microalgae are inoculated and grow, and the vertical garden, where the algae are nurtured and later harvested to feed the convivium.
Yeah, this installation was very much trying to explore also a new idea of domesticity or domestic space, where we again blur the boundaries between the space of production and the space of consumption. So the idea was to create very much a kind of a direct feedback loop between a space that could be inhabited in different ways, but that could be understood on one side as a vertical garden, as a productive space, but on the other side also as a communal space and a space of for sharing and enjoying. And so again, this responds to this idea of blurring the boundaries between typologies, between different programs in architecture, and of course the aesthetic of the system on purpose was designed to play again with this kind of double meaning. On one side, if you can see here, the vertical garden was constructed with a look that suggested a modular system, expandable, very much as a kind of factory logic. But on the other hand, looking closer, the details and the material technologies could be easily translated and transposed into a kind of real domestic environment. So it became part of a new generation of furniture or interior products that have a direct impact into the metabolism, into the way we feed ourselves, into the way we interact with the food production and transformation. But also the way in which we can hack our current domestic spaces, transforming them into little garden, into biotechnological labs, really kind of inserting these possibilities into the fabric of the existing city. And these are some of the photos of the Biobombola, the first product design piece we produced, and it's the first prototype in our home.
So this has been then expanded also to commercial office and commercial space. This is the Biofactory project we developed for Nestlé headquartered in Lisbon, Portugal. The Biofactory cultivate and integrate spirulina in the headquarter in the Lisbon headquarter of Nestlé for weekly harvest and in possible future integration of in their product. This is part of a larger project that rethink what a factory system could be, from a machine for pure production to a mechanism that allow daily interaction and daily remetabolization of some of the fumes, air particle, as well as water particle that factory usually produce in a resource that can be reused and reintegrated in the cycle. These are some of the visualization of the larger biofactory system.
Well, essentially here the factory space has got walls that are actively capturing carbon dioxide and pollutants and producing biomass, which is then transformed and turned into nutrients for actual new products, new food supplements, especially for the vegetable protein supplement, and but also, of course, as we were showing before, bioplastic packaging is biodegradable packaging is the other key sector. So again, circularity transforms the typology of a factory and potentially eliminates the need for transportation of raw material, for use of land, and condenses everything on the shelter, on the walls of the shed itself. So now we are kind of moving to kind of conclusion. We want to expand a little bit the frame. We have done also a lot of research and work on the urban scale and urban planning. We will not go too much in detail on that now, but I think something that is significant is that when we look at the architectures and urban spaces and we transform them into living machines, then all of a sudden they are no longer only terminals or consuming entities, but they become producers as well. So that creates a possibility for a total new conception of urban infrastructure and of the urban sphere, as we call it, the urban landscape, as a kind of metabolically active, productive unit. So this image actually is a part of a project that we developed for the Tallinn Biennale in 2017, which Claudia curated, and that was called the BioTallinn, and in which we imagine the peninsula of Paljassaare on the northeast of the city to be transformed into a kind of a anti-Tallinn almost, and basically growing from the remetabolization of the waste of Tallinn city today. But what was interesting in the process of analyzing and understanding Tallinn, and which is the Estonian capital, of course, and the current infrastructure of the city, when we look at wastewater, for example, it is very much the classical branching tree-like situation where essentially a central processing plant or power station controls and processes the input and output, and then it is distributed as a network to all the terminals, all the buildings, all the architectures, and all the households. And when we look at this same city, but from the perspective of photosynthetica, each building and each public realm becomes actively productive and operational. So then we can recompute, if you want, the infrastructural systems of the city. And what we get is something that looks like this, where new networks, new path systems emerge, connecting, interconnecting locally every building, every public space, and essentially creating a much more distributed and collective system of production and consumption. There is a sort of emerging collective intelligence in the city that transforms it again from a kind of centralized and fragile infrastructure to a much more robust distributed system. And we use the opportunity of the Biennale to speculate on how the city may look like in 30 or 50 years once this transformation, this remetabolization took place, and essentially also looking at the city. At that time we imagine the water level, the Baltic Sea will have grown enough to flood a big part of the city, which is a real possibility in Tallinn. And so these new networks become also a kind of bridging architectures that essentially materialize a new layer for Tallinn, at the same time functional to its interconnectedness, but also very much operational in terms of its energy and waste remetabolization. One of the works that was presented in the Biennale was this video done in collaboration with Heather Barnett, which is a bioartist. And it features this very curious creature called the slime mold. This is again another microorganism, although it is in fact macro because it's visible, but within its body there are hundreds of thousands of nuclei that interact one with the other and with the surrounding environment, and basically create the possibility for these incredible networks and structure to emerge, and to effectively compute the distribution of resources and to efficiently exploit them. So this is an organism that, despite being very, very simple, is actually a monocellular organism, with no nervous system, no brain, nothing. It's still able to compute and to solve complex problems using embedded intelligence. So basically internalizing the environment as a part of its expanded brain. So besides being fascinated from this organism, we also decided to engage with it as potentially a very relevant model for imagining this remetabolization of the city in the future. This is a kind of distributed city where every building, every bit of public realm contributes to the metabolism of the city. And so we have created a series of speculative drawings and visions that also use artificial intelligence to essentially learn how to transpose the behavior of slime mold into cities. So we have trained an algorithm, machine learning algorithm. We have trained it to behave like a slime mold. And then we have submitted a series of satellite images of cities. This is Venice, and it was also presented at the Biennale. And basically asked the algorithm to imagine for us how the city would look like if it was designed by slime mold. If the distributed, emerging, collective intelligence of the slime mold would drive the pattern of urbanization of the city itself. And we have then applied this technique also on the city of Paris. And we have produced a video that will be unveiled next month at the Centre Pompidou in Paris as part of a really wonderful exhibition on the world of networks, which is looking at the concept of network throughout history, the history of computation, the history of city, the history of infrastructure engineering, art, really incredible cross-section. And we have made this a contribution, which is very much focused on the idea of a kind of a bio-digital network designing the future of Paris. And this is also now part of the permanent collection of the Centre Pompidou, which was actually really exciting for us. This is a little preview of the video, which will give you today, just for you to get a sense of this type of development work that we are doing at the urban scale. So the video, as you may have noticed, is starting from a large portion of Paris, 10 kilometers in radius, and then it zooms in all the way to the Pompidou building itself. And it's interesting to see how the artificial intelligence engages with the different scales in a very different way, kind of reading the patterns and the grain of the city in a very different way. When it's the urban scale, really looking at the networks of the structure. This scale is obviously the grain of the building itself. And then, of course, when you go towards the scale of the Pompidou, it's the kind of material logic of the building with his his pipes and infrastructure that becomes the material of speculation. So in that sense, the kind of behavior of the slime mold, the logic of the slime mold is deployed at different scales on different structures, different patterns of the city, and therefore engages with different logics within the urban realm. And this project it's now also operating as a kind of workflow that we are testing and applying on other cities, also in collaboration with the United Nations Development Program. If you check our website, you will see some more detail about that. And then, of course, also the exhibition of the Pompidou will show. There will be another video showing that. So yeah, if you happen to be visiting, that will be a really...
The exhibition opened on the 23rd of February, and then the pieces exhibited there will become part of the Pompidou collection later and further exhibited. So yeah, this is it for our presentation. We hope you found it interesting, and thanks for your patience. It's not so easy remotely maybe to maintain this direct connection, but if there is still time or interest, we are obviously happy to take questions and maybe have a little bit of a conversation. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marco and Claudia. Well, we're a little bit over the time, but we can see if everyone here in the audience has some questions. If you want, you can do it in Portuguese, and then we translate it. Yeah, sure. We need maybe a mic here. Just a moment.
So can you hear me? Thank you for the lecture. My question is about this technology. Like, how long does it live? Can you install, for example, a vertical garden and it just stays there forever, or does it need any maintenance or something?
Yeah, the main objective of introducing a living organism in the fabric of architecture is to create a new metabolism. So a new metabolism means a new series of loops, which obviously demand interaction. Now, we like to call this gardening or cyber gardening rather than maintenance, because obviously it's not about fixing a machine, but it's more about keeping a system alive and healthy. So it is closer to gardening practice than to a maintenance practice. But this is, of course, part of the protocol of photosynthetica. Now, there are obviously different ways and different levels of interaction. Some elements are taken care of autonomously or automatically through sensors and pumps and other devices. And other elements, for example, the harvest of the biomass can be done manually. And this is a process that can be done as often as once a week, or as little as once a month, or once every 2 months. It depends on the kind of a system we have, and also how much nutrients, how much CO2 we feed the system, how much sun there is, what's the temperature. So we get different rates of growth. And so when the growth is very fast and very intense, of course, it's important to harvest regularly. So to give the culture space to grow. If the growth is slower, then there can be more time in between the harvests, because the algae still have room. So it is really a kind of a cycle. Every time you harvest, you add fresh medium, you dilute the culture, so the concentration of the cells diminishes. They have space to grow. When they grow, they replicate, so they get denser and denser again, and then you harvest, and then so on and so forth. And yeah, that's how it works. And if you're good at it, and if the system is healthy, it can go on forever. In practical terms, of course, there are moments in which you empty the reactors and clean them and then inoculate, but the cultures are always alive. You just move them, replicate them, duplicate them. So it's a system that is continuously growing and evolving. And when it becomes part of an urban habitat, the more time it passes, the more it adapts, and actually the performance increases. So that is quite interesting when you compare it to, let's say, mechanical conventional system like, for example, a photovoltaic panel, that typically in time its performance goes down until, after 10 years you have to chunk it away. With living organism is the opposite. Maybe at the beginning needs to adapt, needs to fine tune. It grows a little bit slow, and then time after time it gets better, more and more efficient, and it keeps going forever. So that's the kind of potential with this type of solutions.
Oh, perfect.
More questions?
No?
No?
Don't be shy. Well, I have a specific question, just a little bit about Artus. If I understand it correctly, you 3D print with the biomass of the algae, but also then you insert some more biomass to grow on the first biomass. Is it like that, or did I get it wrong?
Well, I mean, there are two elements, let's say, of the Artus. One is the substratum, we call it, which is the kind of rigid 3D printed scaffolding. And then there is the active living element, that is the biogel, that is injected, inoculated inside in the thickness, in the cells of the substratum. Now, there is the possibility, and we are working on it, for the biomass that grows, to actually be used to produce filament to 3D print. We have done that. But obviously, in the Artus itself, it's not happening live. That is, the 3D printed part at the moment is what it is. It's 3D printed. It's a static. It's a kind of static scaffolding, and the part that evolves and grows and changes is the living biogel that that you can inoculate and then wet, and then it grows, and then you put more, etc., etc. No, so it is really. That's how it works. I think the vision definitely is to go towards a technology where the two elements become more and more enmeshed into each other. Whereas at some point you wouldn't even distinguish, what is alive and what is digitally produced and so on. But obviously that still has challenges to overcome to be able to produce something like that and make it work live. But it's definitely one of the directions. For the moment, we have been able to use the algae that we grow in our system, in our reactors, to produce filament to 3D print. And we have been learning how to 3D print, and also with with the biogel, 3D print biogel. The two are, let's say, beginning to converge, but at the moment in the hortus itself, it's one the container of the other, if you want, or maybe not the container, the scaffolding. In reality, it's an open matrix, no? So the air passes through these filaments, create a kind of screen, no? And the air is able to pass through. So one of the nice aspects of the hortus was to use 3D printing also to overcome the need for a separation or a closed container, no? So in that sense, we can have a more passive system. You don't need the pumps, you don't need all these kind of things. The system works passively. Of course, it requires more interaction, because if the climate is dry, for example, inside of the museum, it's always too dry, and then you need to wet always continuously, otherwise it gets all dry, and it's okay, but when it gets dry, it doesn't photosynthesize so as quickly. So there are these challenges, no? But it's again, I think it's very much part of the philosophy of these projects, is to also begin to develop a new approach to the integration of nature in architecture, which is mediated by technology, but it's not about substituting interaction and creating something that is a completely autonomous, completely technological, as well as it's not about going back to the little plot of land, etc. No? So it's about finding a new paradigm where design technology and interaction and day-to-day gardening practices are fusing. No?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. So, any more questions in the room? No? Shy? Okay. So we move on. Thank you, Marco and Claudia.
Thank
it was really amazing presentation. I think we are all overwhelmed and thinking where we can get some algae to start doing this. It's very exciting.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here.
It was great to be part of your wonderful event, and yeah, we really hope next time to be there in person. But for now, we thank you for the invitation and wish you a great couple of days.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye.